And he said, what would be the least amount you would take? And I upped it $500, thinking I was free and clear. And he came in the next morning and said they'd had a school board member and I'd been hired. That's how I got here. My name is Phyllis Blakeman, and I was the one and only child of Todd and Sybil, and I was born in Greene County in October 2nd, 1932, which makes me pretty much a senior citizen now, I guess. I lived there till I was 7, I think, or 9, maybe. We moved to Texas, and then we lived in Texas and North Carolina and Hopkinsville and Indiana, and I was in the 7th grade when I was 9 years old, because I'd been double promoted twice. And I know when we moved when he went to Texas and got a job down there, and my mother, at that time it seemed like the other side of the world, you know. And he was down there a week, and he said, well, I've rented this house down there. And of course, Mother couldn't wait to get down there then. But I remember when they bombed Pearl Harbor. And I'll never forget that, because it scared me to death. I thought they were on their way over here to bomb us that day. We'd been to a movie and had seen Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Came out and found out that they'd bombed Pearl Harbor. Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. I remember when I was 3 years old. And, yeah, we lived out on my granddad's farm with my granddad on the farm. Daddy, he tried to get Daddy interested in farming, which was didn't work. And then we left there. I went to a one-room school until I was in the 5th grade. That school was on my grandpa's farm across the road. Carried my lunch. Miss Bonnie Burroughs was the teacher and the smartest woman. She covered art every day. Now, we had art, we had music, we did plays. Whenever there was any kind of a holiday or anything, we did plays and put up a sheet in the room, you know, and invited all the parents. And I remember her so well and how she worked in all of those things, and I learned all that. And what one, you know, the older one would teach the younger ones, anyway, she double promoted me from a 3rd grade because I already knew the multiplication table and I could read. And so when I was in the 5th grade, we moved to Texas, and they put me up in the 6th grade for some reason or other. So that put me way ahead. So I was always 2 years younger than everybody else, and I'd lie about my age because I couldn't come around and just say a lie. So I would, they'd say, you know, when anybody asked me, I'd say, well, I'll be 14 in October. Well, I'll be 14 maybe October, but 2 years down the road. But anyway, then I ended up going to junior high and high school in Louisville. The last year of Louisville Girls High School, which is now Manual. And when I graduated from high school in Louisville, I was 16, and I wanted to go to Western. And Mother and Daddy wanted me to go. They thought I was too young to go away from home, and they wanted me to go U of L. And so we had a big standoff, and I didn't go anywhere for a year. I did one of those draw me things, you know, that was in a paper. Have you ever seen those little ads that they used to have in magazines and things? I don't know if they still have them or not. And they have draw me on there, and you send in, you try that, and you send it in. Well, of course, they immediately send a salesman out and tell you how talented you are. And so anyway, I did a correspondence course with that, and then went to Western that following year. Well, what I really wanted to do was to be an illustrator. I don't know if you remember this or not, but you remember the ads in the paper, like for Stewart's and all of the department stores, had these big ads in, and they'd have these drawings of their fashions of their clothes. And that's what I like to do. I'd sit for hours and design clothes and do these fashion drawings. And I even, when I was in college, went to one of the department stores there and show her my work. And they said, yeah, that's very good. You know, come back when you're out of school and we'll talk about, you know, you're getting a job here. Well, in the meantime, they started computerizing everything to where, you know, they don't use the artistic drawings anymore like that. So when I was in college, luckily I had taken some education courses in art. Of course, I'd majored in art down there. And I wanted to go into commercial art of some kind, and had an interview and found out that was just what they were looking for, except they didn't hire women in that job. And the week before I graduated, they called me from the placement office and said that Erlanger wanted to start an art program. And at that time, art teachers were few and far between, and if you found one, they stayed in the job forever. And so anyway, a friend of mine went up to teach English, and I went up and to apply for the job as to teach art and start the art program there. And so I taught elementary art and went to grade schools, you know, and had a couple of high school classes that I started with limited supplies. And then when I came down here, I didn't plan to come here either. But my dad had bought the hotel. The second year I taught, when I was second year, I was up there in northern Kentucky in Erlanger. And they brought the hotel, and I was home for spring break. And Daddy said, Mr. Haney'd like to talk to you about teaching here. And I said, Daddy, I'm happy where, and I was, because I was an only child. I had an apartment, I was out on my own and up in Cincinnati, and just really liked what I was doing. And he said, I know, but he said, you can have coffee with him. Well, he came in and he talked to me about starting the art program here. And I said, how much? I said, I'm happy where I am, what would my salary be? And it would be the same as it was up there. And I said, well, I can't see the possibility of moving without an advancement. And he said, well, we don't have any, I wish we could, we don't have any more money. So I thought I was out of that clear, and he said, I understand. And so then Glenn Sanders came in, and he said, what would be the least amount you would take? And I upped it $500, thinking I was free and clear. And he came in the next morning and said they'd had a school board member and I'd been hired. That's how I got here.
Sounds like you were almost disappointed in a way.
Well, I was happy where I was. But I did come back here, and my first job was at Magnolia. And I taught all of the senior high English. In the afternoons, I taught public school music, went to classroom at the elementary and taught music. And in Buffalo, 2 days a week, taught music. And I directed the play and senior class and loved it. And then I went the last year up at the high school, and then started the art program at the new school when we went out there with a budget of $300 a year. Well, where the bank is now, the bank was on the corner. It took up the space on the corner there, and then there was a barber shop, and then the lobby of the hotel, which led upstairs, and then the coffee shop was down in the corner. And it was a coffee shop, and then Daddy built a private dining room behind that, where the Rotary met and different groups met. And then upstairs was, I think, 30 rooms. And my folks lived on the second floor in an L-shaped room, and I had a double room across the hall from them. And the other rooms were regular size, yeah. All the rooms were on second and third floor. And let's see, it was an M&M Cafe was back there, I think, in the Western Auto Store. Paul Civils had, I think he had a restaurant up underneath where the Lincoln Jamboree is now. I mean, Lincoln Jamboree used to be in the old Masonic building, you know, there. And I used to sit upstairs and listen to them. I could hear them on Saturday night, and a lot of those people who came there became pretty good stars, and they ate downstairs. You know, ate with us a lot. And Platt and Scruggs, I think, were there one time, and Skeeter Davis, I believe. I don't remember all of them, but I used to sit and listen to them. And on Saturday night, of course, Hodgenville used to be open. That's when everybody came to town on Saturday night. And they'd drive around the square and drive around the square and walk around the square and walk around the square till 9 o'clock. And then they'd all go home. But that was a big day was on Saturday night then. And then, of course, the dime store was on the other side, Markham's Dime Store. And the Board of Education was upstairs over that.
Freezer.
Yeah, that was back in that freezer part. I think that was back, you know, where Alex has his insurance office, back in the left down in that way, I think, if I remember right. Of course, there was a drugstore there where the radio station is now, and then Mose Hamilton. Of course, he had the other drugstore where Smith's is now. That may not have been a drugstore. I'm thinking it was a drug. Well, and the Robertson's was a drugstore over on the corner down from the clinic, you know, on that corner. And it was a movie theater there for a while too, the Mary Anderson movie theater, and then it was a bowling alley there. And, well, of course, I was learning along with everybody else with everything. You know, when you're teaching, you do that, and I hadn't. And in fact, it's so computerized now, the yearbook is. And Kim, when Kim was out there and had the yearbook out at school, and she had me come out there one time when she was working on it and talked about starting the old one. And I was telling them how you had to take the pictures and you had to draw it off, you know, and do all of this stuff by hand. And they all looked at me and they said, "How'd you do that?" I said, "Well, you just do it. You know, if you wanted to make them larger or smaller, you know, learn how to, you had to draw it off on this page. You didn't have the computer to do all that for you." And so I learned a lot. It was fun to do. But, of course, they have so much more in the yearbooks now than they did then. We didn't have that much to go in them. Well, as you've looked over there, you've seen all kinds. It's watercolor mostly, and I like pen and ink. I really like pen and ink, except my fingers are arthritic now, and they won't go to the fine points like it's supposed to be. But I like to do pen and ink, and I did oil and acrylics. I'm not crazy about acrylics at all. It's too flat looking. And I like just drawing, just in like sketchbooks. Some of the fun things I've had to do, just start with something and just let it go crazy, you know, and see what that does and lead to that, and it gets whimsical, you know. Every movement in art was a social adjustment or a social movement, either having to do with politics or having to do with a subject in art. But it's a reflection of the times, just like your pop art and your abstract art. And abstract art actually is some people think it's just a bunch of paint thrown on there, but usually abstract art is from an actual object that is abstracted, if that makes sense. And for Impressionism, I'm not crazy about Impressionism. Most people think they have a misconstrued idea of what Impressionism is. They think Impressionism is just first thing you put on paper, and that's not it. It's has a lot to do with when the Impressionists started. It had a lot to do with the study of light and the affection of the way it got its name. Mostly it was a study of light and the effect of light on the subject. But the way it got its name was when they had their first exhibit. Was one of the reporters said it looked like they painted the first impression they got, but that's how it got its name. So it really wasn't that at all. And it's like I would tell my kids, a lot of them would plan to go to art. And parents, if they showed any talent at all, parents would come in and want to know where's a good art school they could go to, where should they go to school to study art. And I would always encourage them to go to a good university and take other classes. There are an awful lot of good artists, like there are an awful lot of good musicians who don't have work. You're lucky if, as an artist, you make a living at it. You need to have something that you can fall back on. Because really, you look around, look at the people you know that are good musicians. And look at the ones who make it big and that, I don't think they're all that good, but they manage to be at the right place at the right time or have the right promoter. And it's the same way with art, with like when you read about, and I have a hard time explaining, or did with my kids, why some of the paintings that would sell for millions of dollars, that were the old masters. And they find out that some of the old masters now copied from somebody else. One of the things I saw in the Louvre, which I thought I'll never forget, it was one of the most interesting things, is how artists learn from one another. And when I went through the Louvre in Paris, there was a little old woman, and she looked like she was 80 years old, sitting up on this tall stool with this big canvas, copying this painting. And she was copying this painting and had I don't know how many battle scenes in it, with the warriors and the horses and all of this, and no telling how long she had been sitting there copying that painting. And that's, that's what, I don't know what she'd have when she'd copied it. It wasn't original, she couldn't do anything with it. But there she was, copying that painting. I just thought it was amusing, that she'd spend all this time copying a painting, and why she'd pick such a hard one. If you were going to copy one, why'd pick one that was so involved? I don't know. I thank God every night for giving me a life that has been fulfilling. I miss the fact that I don't have family. I miss the fact I don't have brothers and sisters. And I miss that, but I have been so grateful that, first of all, that I've lived longer than most of my friends. And I'm still fairly functional and fairly literate and make sense most of the time. I might tell the same story over 2 or 3 times, but no, I'm grateful that I don't have to worry about paying the rent. I don't have to worry about food on the table or things like that. Or I don't know what the secret is. I'm lucky that I have never had high blood pressure. I don't take cholesterol or blood pressure pills or heart pills or anything like that, which is, I'm grateful for that. It's not from my mother's side or my dad's side. I don't know where I got it. You just take it as just be grateful for what you got. If you've got good friends, and if you've got somebody, I'll tell you one thing if I get upset about something, if I've got a good friend that I can go and just say what I want to say without them ever thinking it's all, you know, and let them deal with it, without them thinking more than I'm a sounding board. In other words, if I can have a sounding, I've never been able to stay mad at anybody for any length of time, or, you know, I just don't, it's not worth it. I want people to like me. I don't want to dislike everybody else, though.